Today's video will talk about why adaptability is so important in the software development process. Hello, I'm James Helfrich. We have many software design metrics, one of which is adaptability, which is the ease in which we can change the software to meet changing requirements. Now, the question is, why is this such a big deal? Well, to understand this, we have to take a little trip back in history to look how software development used to be done and how it's done today. We begin with the story of Wilson Royce. Royce was a software engineer back in the late 60s and early 70s, and he wrote the seminal paper which described the software development as it was done at the time. And during this process, we first listed the requirements and created a document called the SRS. And then we did some analysis, basically prototyping to see how we're going to implement the requirements. Then we came up with a design, and this design described the complete program. Then we wrote the code, we tested it, and then we documented it. Now, in this process, we created several documents, one of which, like we mentioned before, is a software requirement specification, otherwise an SRS. And this document needed to be complete. I want to know exactly what the project has to do before I write a single line of code. And then after that, we're going to come up with a complete design for the entire project in one large monolithic document. And at this point in time, we once again have to completely understand not only the requirements, but also everything the software needs to do. Now, there's a big problem with this process. The big problem is it's impossible to know all the things the software has to do from the onset. Now, in the typical academic setting, this is really easy. Just ask your teacher what the software is supposed to do, and they give you the requirements document. And this is known because the teacher has given out this assignment hundreds or thousands of times before. In the real world, though, however, the project is essentially unknown. It's impossible to know exactly what needs to happen until the very end, when finally we figured out all the technology and all the design problems. So to address this problem, 17 software engineers gathered in Snowbird, Utah in 2001 to discuss this, and they came up with something called the Agile Manifesto. Now, this manifesto described what a successful project should look like. And from that, the SCRUM software development methodology was born. Now, the fundamental idea behind this methodology is we're only going to work in 2-week sprints. Sometimes the sprints could be 1 week or 4 weeks, whatever, but the important thing is they're small. And so we have the requirements called user stories in this case for this 2 or 4 week sprint. Then we're going to design it, write the code, and then show it to the product owner or the client to see what they think. And then from there, a new set of requirements for the next 2 weeks will be come up with. And we keep this process in 2-week sprints as we go to make sure we don't have to think too far ahead. How many sprints required? We don't know at the onset because we can only see 2 weeks in advance. This methodology works great when the requirements are unknown, which is the vast majority of the time. But it also means that sometimes we write code which is not quite right because our understanding of the project is not perfect yet. So what do? We have to make our project really adaptable. Otherwise, when the inevitable change in requirements is made, when the subject matter expert or the product owner says, hey, actually, I was wrong, we need to do Y instead of X, or I forgot about this extra requirement, we don't have to go back and write a bunch of new code. Code that is high in the adaptability metric is easy to change for changing requirements, and that is an essential part of this process. Many new developers think that the software creation process is mostly about writing code, and this simply is not true. The software creation process is essentially a learning process where we learn about the technology, about the project, and learning about the product we're supposed to build. The hope is that our understanding of the product will be closer to reality as the project nears completion. So now here's the quote of the day. We will never again be as ignorant as we are today. In other words, every day that we work on the project, we should be increasing the learning process. We're becoming more knowledgeable about the technology and what the project is supposed to do. You can learn more about adaptability in the adaptability chapter of the software design textbook.